"Did you forget the lemon again?" the millionaire said coldly, pushing the glass back toward her without looking up. Aurora didn't answer. Across the polished table, his signature carved a clean, brutal 0 on the tip line. "Try a little harder." The words burned through her chest, not because he was cruel, but because the man humiliating her had once promised her mother forever. He still didn't recognize her. Didn't see Sophia's eyes staring back at him. Didn't know the exhausted waitress standing beside his table carried the last piece of the life he abandoned 25 years ago. And tonight, for the first time, she knew the truth. The scent of overbrewed coffee lemon polish and simmering desperation was the official perfume of the Gilded Spoon. It was a place that pretended to be more than it was a mid-tier bistro with 5-star aspirations and a clientele who believed their bank balance entitled them to behave like feudal lords. For Aurora Templeton, it was simply the place that kept the lights on in her tiny, drafty apartment and paid for the art supplies she rarely had the energy to use. At 25, Bella felt older than her years. The light in her hazel eyes, a reflection of the vibrant, hopeful girl she used to be, was often dimmed by exhaustion. Her mother, Sophia, had passed away 6 months ago after a brutal fight with cancer, taking with her the warmth and the small, fragile sense of security that had defined Bella's world. Now she was truly alone, armed only with a mountain of medical debt, a half-finished graphic design portfolio, and a resilience that was being tested daily. Her best friend and fellow waiter Liam slid a glass of water onto the service counter. "You've got table 7, he said, his voice low. "Brace yourself. It's him." Bella didn't need to ask who him was. Carter Ellison. The name alone was enough to make the staff's shoulders tense. He was a titan of industry, the CEO of Ellison Global Holdings, a man whose picture was frequently in the Financial Times, but whose personality was best captured in a horror novel. He came into the Gilded Spoon twice a week for lunch, not because he liked the food. He made it painfully clear he did not, but because it was conveniently located, and as Liam theorized, he enjoyed having a fresh audience for his particular brand of casual cruelty. "Joy," Bella muttered, tying her apron tighter, as if it were a suit of armor. She plastered on her professional smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes, and picked up a menu. Carter Ellison sat alone, his back ramrod straight, his custom-tailored suit probably costing more than Bella's entire yearly income. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was staring out the window, his face a mask of stern impatience. He was handsome in a severe sculpted way, with sharp cheekbones, piercing blue eyes and silver-streaked dark hair. But there was no softness in his features, only a chilling authority. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Bella asked, her voice even and polite. He didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed outside. Sparkling water Italian with a single perfectly spherical ice cube and a wedge of lime, not lemon. The lime must be freshly cut. I can taste the difference if it's been sitting out. His voice was a low baritone, crisp, and devoid of any warmth. "Of course, sir," Bella said, making a mental note of the needlessly complex order. It was his signature move, an immediate test of competence and subservience. She returned moments later with the water prepared exactly as he'd requested. She had personally selected the lime and sliced it herself. She placed it on the table with a steady hand. He finally turned his head, his cold blue eyes sweeping over her for the first time. It was a dismissive glance, the kind one gives to a piece of furniture that is slightly out of place. He picked up the glass, swirled it, and took a small sip. "Passable," he conceded, setting the glass down with a definitive click. "The menu. It's right here, sir," Bella said, gesturing to the menu she had already placed on the table. He gave a long, suffering sigh, as if her very existence was an inconvenience. "I know where it is. I am telling you to present it to me." It was a power play, pure and simple. Bella held her ground, her smile tightening. "Our special today is a pan-seared salmon with an asparagus risotto and a dill cream sauce. I don't care about your special." he sneered, finally picking up the menu. He scanned it for less than 10 seconds before snapping it shut. The steak medium rare. And when I say medium rare, I don't mean the chef's interpretation of it. I mean a warm red center. If it comes out even a shade towards medium, I will send it back. The fries should be crispy, not limp with oil. And I want the seasonal vegetables, but hold the carrots. I detest carrots. Steak medium rare, crispy fries. Seasonal vegetables, no carrots. Excellent choice, sir. Bella said the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She retreated to the pour system, her hands trembling slightly as she punched in the order. Liam came up behind her. He's in rare form today. Did he ask you to personally pluck the chicken yet, Close? Bella sighed, leaning against the counter. He specified the geometry of his ice cube. Liam shook his head. The man's a sociopath in a suit. Don't let him get to you. I'm trying, she whispered, but some days it just feels personal. Like he looks at me and sees everything he despises. He looks at everyone like that, Bella. It's not you, it's him. But Liam was wrong. It did feel personal. It was the way his eyes, the color of a winter sky, seemed to look straight through her, dismissing her entire being as worthless. It dredged up old insecurities. The feeling of not being good enough that had haunted her since childhood. A ghost she could never quite shake. Her mother had always been there to banish those ghosts, to tell her she was smart and talented and worthy. Without Sophia, the ghosts felt more real, and Carter Ellison was their king. The food was ready. Bella personally inspected the steak, pressing the center lightly. It felt right. The fries were golden brown, the vegetables glistened. She carried the heavy plate to his table. "Your steak, sir," she announced, placing it before him. He didn't thank her. He picked up his knife and fork and sliced precisely into the center of the meat. He leaned in, inspecting it like a jeweler examining a flawed diamond. He took a single bite, chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. Bella held her breath. "It's acceptable," he finally declared. He then picked up a green bean from his plate with his fingers, held it up, and looked at her. "This is overcooked. Its structural integrity has been compromised." Bella stared at the green bean, then back at his dead serious face. For a moment she thought it was a joke, a bizarre attempt at humor, but his eyes were cold, expectant. He was serious. "I am so sorry about that, sir," she said, her training kicking in. "Would you like me to bring you a new side of vegetables?" "Don't be ridiculous. The moment has passed," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "Just ensure it doesn't happen again. One expects a certain standard even in a place like this." He ate the rest of his meal in silence, never once looking up. Bella avoided the table, sending Liam to refill his water. The sheer arrogance of the man radiated from him like a toxic aura, poisoning the air around him. When he was finally finished, he stacked his plates neatly, a sign she knew that he was ready for the check. She dropped it off without a word. He placed a black credit card on top. When she brought back the slip for him to sign, he took his time, his expensive fountain pen scratching against the paper. He pushed it to the edge of the table and stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance. Bella walked over to the table, a sense of dread washing over her. His tips were notoriously insulting. $1, sometimes just loose change. It was another way to remind them of their station. She picked up the slip. The total was 87, faded at 50 tala. On the tip line, he had written a single bold number 0, and below it in sharp, angular handwriting were 4 words. "Try a little harder." The ink seemed to burn on the page. It wasn't just a 0 tip. It was a personal critique, a calculated blow. All her effort, her patience, her swallowing of pride for nothing, for a slap in the face. A hot tear of fury and humiliation pricked her eye. She quickly wiped it away, crumbling the receipt in her fist. "Don't look," Liam said softly, coming to clear the plates. "Just throw it away. He's not worth the paper he writes on." Bella unclenched her fist and smoothed out the paper. She stared at the sharp, elegant handwriting, the cruel words. One day, she whispered to herself a vow forming in the broken parts of her heart. I'll be somewhere he can't reach me. I'll be someone he can't dismiss. She didn't know then how prophetic those words would be, or how spectacularly terribly wrong she was. Carter Ellison was already closer to her than she could ever imagine. The encounters with Carter Ellison became a grim ritual. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he would appear a storm cloud in a bespoke suit, and the air in the Gilded Spoon would grow heavy. He never varied his order, but he always found a new flaw. The soup was a degree too tepid. The bread wasn't crusty enough. The music was distracting. Each complaint was delivered with the same detached superiority, a surgeon dissecting a cadaver. Bella learned to cope by dissociating. She became a machine, a polite automaton that delivered food and absorbed insults without reaction. But behind the professional veneer, a slow-burning anger was solidifying into something harder, something that felt dangerously like hatred. One rainy Thursday, he was particularly vile. The restaurant was busy and the kitchen was backed up. His steak took 3 minutes longer than usual. "Is the cow being slaughtered to order?" he'd asked flatly when she apologized for the delay. When the food arrived, he claimed the fries were cold, though steam was visibly rising from them. He sent them back. When the fresh batch came, he ate too and left the rest, declaring his appetite ruined. He left no tip, but this time the note on the receipt read, "Perhaps a career requiring less precision would be more suitable." That night, Bella walked home in the drizzle, the cruel words echoing in her head. They stung more than the others because they hit her where she was most vulnerable. Her stalled ambition, her dream of being a graphic designer felt more distant than ever. She spent her days serving people like Ellison and her nights too exhausted to even open her sketchbook. His words weren't just an insult. They felt like a verdict on her life. She let herself into a small apartment, the one she and her mother had shared. It still smelled faintly of Sophia's favorite lavender soap. Most of her mother's belongings had been sorted, given away to charity, or packed into storage. But one thing remained sitting on the dusty top shelf of the hall closet, a large, sturdy shoebox sealed with yellowing tape. Sophia had called it her box of ghosts. It contained mementos from her life before Bella, a life she rarely spoke of. "Some things are best left in the past, to Sora Romero," she would say with a sad smile whenever a young Bella would ask about it. She'd made Bella promise not to open it until she was truly ready to understand. Bella hadn't known what that meant after her mother died. She couldn't bring herself to touch it. The grief was too raw. But tonight was different. Ellison's relentless cruelty had hollowed her out, leaving her feeling disconnected from herself, from the person her mother had raised her to be. She needed a reminder of where she came from. She needed a piece of her mom. With a resolve she hadn't felt in months, she dragged a chair into the hall, climbed up, and carefully lifted the box down. It was heavier than she expected. She sat on the floor, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs, and slit the tape with a kitchen knife. The scent of old paper and dried flowers wafted out. On top lay a stack of old vinyl records, mostly Italian crooners Sophia had loved. Beneath them, nestled in tissue paper, were the real treasures. First, a small velvet-covered journal. Bella opened it. It was her mother's diary from when she was in her early 20s, just after she'd arrived in America from Italy. The entries were full of hope, excitement, and the challenges of starting a new life. Then she saw the photographs, bundles of them tied with faded ribbon. There were pictures of a young, radiant Sophia, her dark hair long and wild, laughing on a beach, posing in front of city landmarks. She looked so carefree, so full of life. It hurt to see, in one bundle there was a man with her. He was young, probably the same age as Sophia, with an intense, ambitious look in his eyes. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but he was striking with a sharp jawline and deep-set eyes that seemed to burn with purpose. In some photos, he and Sophia were laughing arms around each other. In others, they looked at each other with an aching tenderness that leapt off the glossy paper. Bella's breath hitched. She felt a strange pang of something. Recognition. She'd never seen this man before. Her mother had never mentioned a serious boyfriend from her past. Who was he? She kept digging. At the very bottom of the box, wrapped in a silk scarf, was a small, heavy object. It was a locket, silver tarnished with age in the shape of a perfect circle. On the front, two initials were intricately engraved, entwined with each other. S and A with trembling fingers. Bella pried it open. Inside were two tiny, perfectly preserved photographs. On one side was her mother, Sophia, looking impossibly young and in love. On the other side was the young man from the photographs. His expression in the tiny portrait was softer, a rare small smile playing on his lips. Bella stared at the man's face, her mind racing. The initial on the locket. His name must have started with. She looked closer at the face in the picture, at the sharp cheekbones, the intense eyes, the set of his jaw. A cold, horrifying familiarity began to creep up her spine. It was impossible. It had to be a coincidence, a cruel trick of the mind. She scrambled back to the pile of photographs, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. She found the clearest photo of the young man's face and held it under the lamplight. She studied the shape of his eyes, his nose, the line of his mouth. Then she pulled out her phone and, with a sense of sickening dread, typed Carter Ellison Young into the search bar. The search results loaded. An old article from a business journal appeared, titled Carter Ellison, The Making of a Mogul. It featured a black and white photo of him from 30 years ago, accepting some sort of entrepreneurial award. He was older than in her mother's photos, his hair shorter, a suit replacing the casual clothes. But it was him, unmistakably. The same piercing eyes, the same jawline, the same man. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Bella stared at the locket in her palm. Ascende Sophia and Carter. The air rushed out of her lungs. The room began to spin. Carter Ellison, the cruel, arrogant millionaire who treated her like dirt, the man whose casual insults had haunted her for months, the man she hated with every fiber of her being. She scrambled for the diary, her mind a chaotic storm of denial and horror. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the neat looping script for a name. And there it was, October 12th. Carter gave me a locket today. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He said the S&A stands for Sophia and Carter always. I feel like my heart could burst. He talks about his plans, his company Ellison something or other. He says one day he'll be on top of the world and he wants me there with him. I believe him. I would follow him anywhere. Bella's blood ran cold. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a fact. A terrible, world-shattering fact. This man, her personal tormentor, had loved her mother. Her mother had loved him. The questions came in a flood, each one more painful than the last. What happened? Why did they break up? And the most terrifying question of all, the one that was now screaming in her mind, refusing to be silenced. Did he know about her? Was Carter Ellison the monster from Table 7, her biological father? She felt a wave of nausea, so profound she had to brace herself against the wall. She looked from the loving face of the young man in the locket to the cruel, dismissive face she saw twice a week. They were the same person. How could they be? She sank to the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of her mother's past. The hatred she felt for Carter Ellison was now tangled with a dizzying, sickening cocktail of confusion, betrayal, and a deep, aching grief for a story she never knew. Her life, which had felt small and difficult, had just fractured into a million incomprehensible pieces, and at the center of it all was the face of the man she had to serve in the morning. Sleep offered no escape. Bella's dreams were a feverish collage of images, her mother's smiling face melting into Carter Ellison's cold sneer. The engraved locket growing heavy in her hand, pulling her down into darkness, the sound of his voice saying, "Try a little harder." Over and over again, she woke up feeling like she'd been run over, the harsh reality of her discovery settling in her bones like a permanent chill. He was her father. The words felt foreign, impossible. A father was meant to be a source of protection, of love, of identity. Carter Ellison was a source of humiliation and anxiety. The chasm between the man in Sophia's diary, the passionate, ambitious Al, who promised her the world, and the callous tycoon who critiqued her service, was too vast to comprehend. Her first instinct was to run to quit her job, pack her bags, and disappear, let him sit at table 7 and torture someone else. But where would she go? Her financial situation was a razor's edge. Quitting without another job lined up was a luxury she couldn't afford. So she did the only thing she could. She went to work. The walk to the Gilded Spoon felt different. The city streets, the familiar faces, her own reflection in the shop windows. Everything seemed alien. She was no longer just Aurora Templeton's struggling waitress. She was Aurora Templeton, the secret unknown daughter of Carter Ellison. The thought was so absurd, it bordered on hysterical. When she walked into the restaurant, Liam greeted her with his usual cheerful smile. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," she mumbled, tying on her apron. It felt like a costume, a disguise. "I think I'm living with one." She couldn't tell him. The secret was too new, too monstrous. It felt like a fragile, throbbing wound. To speak it aloud would be to make it irrevocably real. For the first few hours, she moved through her shift in a daze. She refilled coffee cups, took orders, and cleared plates, but her mind was elsewhere, sifting through the contents of the box. She had stayed up half the night reading her mother's diary. The entries painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture. Sophia and Carter had met at a university library where she was shelving books part-time. He was a business student consumed by his vision for a future empire. He was brilliant, driven, and back then, utterly captivated by Sophia's warmth and spirit. He called her his anchor, the one who kept him grounded. But as his ambitions grew, a shadow fell over their romance. His focus shifted from them to him. The diary entries became tinged with sadness. March 4th. Carter was supposed to meet my friends tonight. He canned at the last minute for a networking event. He said, "These people matter, Sophia. This is the foundation." I wanted to ask him, "Don't I matter?" But I didn't. May 21st, we had a fight, a bad one. I said he was becoming cold, that his company was the only thing he truly loved. He told me I didn't understand the pressure he was under, that I was being sentimental. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at his business plan spread across the table. The final entry about him was stark and painful. June 15th. It's over. He said he needed to be ruthless to succeed, and that meant no distractions. He said he loved me, but that love was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. He is moving across the country to launch his first big venture. He didn't ask me to come. He didn't even leave the door open. He just left. He chose his dream over me. There was no mention of a pregnancy. Bella checked the dates. The breakup was in June. Her birthday was the following February. The timeline was undeniable. Sophia must have found out she was pregnant after he was already gone, and she had chosen to raise her daughter alone, never telling the man who broke her heart that he was a father. A wave of fierce protective love for her mother washed over Bella. She pictured Sophia young and alone in a foreign country, choosing to face pregnancy and single motherhood rather than go back to a man who had called her a distraction. Her mother had shielded her from him, from his coldness, from his ambition. She had given Bella a life filled with love, even if it was also filled with struggle. The bell above the restaurant door chimed, and Bella's head snapped up. Carter Ellison walked in her heart, hammered against her ribs. It wasn't just a rude customer anymore. It was him, her father, the man who had abandoned her mother. He took his seat at table 7, and one of the new hostesses, unaware of the unspoken rule, assigned the table to Bella. It was her section. There was no escaping it. Liam caught her eye, his expression sympathetic. "Want me to take it?" he mouthed. Bella shook her head. A strange, defiant resolve settled over her. She had to do this. She had to face him armed with this terrible new knowledge. She walked to his table, her legs feeling unsteady. This time, she wasn't just seeing a wealthy bully. She was seeing the man from the photographs. She searched his face for any trace of the young man her mother had loved. The piercing blue eyes were the same, but the light in them was gone, replaced by a glacial hardness. The sharp jawline was still there, but now it was set in a permanent mask of disapproval. "Good afternoon, sir," she said. Her voice was steady, but it cost her every ounce of control. He looked up, and for the first time their eyes met and held for a fraction of a second longer than usual. Did he see something? A flicker of recognition? A ghost of Sophia in her features? No. His expression remained unchanged, cold, imperious. "The usual," he said, already dismissing her to look out the window. As Bella walked away, she felt a profound sense of emptiness. She had half expected, or perhaps dreaded, some sort of sign, some spark of connection. There was nothing. To him, she was still just the waitress, a faceless cog in the machinery of his day. The knowledge changed everything about the interaction. Every demand he made, every sigh of impatience, was no longer just the rudeness of a stranger. It was the neglect of a father. His complaint that his water wasn't cold enough felt like a personal rejection on a cosmic scale. When she brought him his steak, her hand was trembling. As she set the plate down, her thumb brushed against the warm ceramic edge. He recoiled slightly. "Please be careful," he said, his voice sharp with annoyance. "I don't particularly want your fingerprints on my plate." The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Your fingerprints. Her fingerprints. The fingerprints of his own daughter. Something inside Bella snapped. The careful facade of the professional waitress cracked. She didn't lash out. She didn't cry. Instead, a chilling coldness settled over her, mirroring his own. She looked him directly in the eye. Her own hazel eyes, so much like her mother's, were flat and hard. "My apologies, sir," she said, her voice devoid of its usual forced warmth. It was clipped professional, but utterly hollow. She turned and walked away without another word. For the rest of his meal, she was a ghost. She did her job with icy efficiency, but she offered no smiles, no pleasantries. She refilled his water from a distance. She cleared his plates in silence. She was a presence, but she was no longer trying to please him. Carter noticed the change. She could feel his eyes on her as she moved through the dining room. His brow was furrowed in a slight frown. He was used to her trying to her, placating him. This new cold defiance was something different. It was something he wasn't controlling. It piqued his interest like a malfunctioning cog in a machine he expected to run perfectly. When he was done, she dropped the check on his table without a word. As he prepared to sign, he looked up at her one last time, a question in his cold blue eyes. Bella met his gaze and held at her expression unreadable. For a moment they were just two people locked in a silent battle of wills, the vast unspoken history hanging between them like a curtain of glass. Then he looked away, signed the slip, and left. Bella walked over to the table, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She already knew what she would find: a zero on the tip line. But this time, she didn't care about the money. She was looking for the note. There was one in the same sharp, angular script. An improvement. Silence is golden. Bella didn't crumble the receipt. She folded it neatly and put it in her apron pocket. It was evidence, another piece of the puzzle of who this man was. He preferred her silent and invisible. He had no idea how much of his own history he was trying to erase. The following weeks were a strange, tense dance. Bella continued her cold, efficient service, and Carter continued to watch her with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. The dynamic had shifted. She no longer felt like a victim cowering before him. Armed with her secret, she felt powerful in a tragic sort of way. She knew who he was while he remained blissfully ignorant. The knowledge was a shield. Her life outside the restaurant, however, was crumbling. The emotional toll of her discovery was immense. She spent her nights staring at the locket at her mother's diary, trying to reconcile the two Carters. Her graphic design work sat untouched. Her grief for her mother was now complicated by a fresh anger at the man who had caused her so much pain. Liam knew something was deeply wrong. "Bella, you have to talk to me," he pleaded one evening after a shift. "You're like a walking shadow. Is it about Ellison? Did he do something?" He's always doing something. She deflected, unable to share the impossible truth. I'm just tired of it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late autumn. The restaurant was unusually quiet. A young waiter, a nervous kid named Tom, who was only on his third shift, was assigned the section next to Bella's. By a stroke of bad luck, a large party cancelled and the manager reseated Carter Ellison in Tom's section. Bella watched with a sense of impending doom as Tom trembling slightly approached the table. She could hear Ellison's clipped, demanding tone from across the room. She saw Tom's shoulders slump as he skewered back and forth, trying desperately to meet the impossible standards. The final straw was the soup. Ellison had ordered the butternut squash soup, a daily special. Tom delivered it, his hands shaking so much that a tiny drop sloshed onto the saucer. Ellison looked at the drop as if it were a venomous insect. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet, cutting tone was far more effective. "Tell me, young man," he said, loud enough for the few nearby tables to hear. "Is this your first time in a service environment, or are you simply incompetent by nature?" Tom turned beet red. I'm so sorry, sir. I can get you a new one." "A new one?" Ellison scoffed, pushing the bowl away. "The entire experience is now tainted by this sloppiness. It speaks to a lack of care, a lack of focus. If you cannot be trusted to carry a simple bowl of soup, how can you be trusted with anything of consequence?" Tom looked like he was about to burst into tears. "I'm sorry, sir," he stammered again, his voice cracking. The manager, Mr. Henderson, rushed over his face, a mask of panicked apology. "Mr. Ellison, my deepest apologies. Tom is new. It won't happen again." Ellison looked from Tom's humiliated face to Henderson's graveling one. "See that it doesn't," he said coldly. Then he added, "In fact, I don't want to see him again. His presence offends my sense of order. It was an execution, a quiet, brutal command. Pray." Henderson, terrified of losing a wealthy if awful customer, simply nodded. "Tom," he said, turning to the boy, "my office now." And that was it. A young kid's livelihood destroyed over a drop of soup. Something in Bella, something that had been simmering for weeks, boiled over. The shield of her cold detachment shattered, replaced by a white-hot rage. It wasn't just about Tom. It was about her mother left behind for being a distraction. It was about her own life of struggle while this man sat on a throne of wealth, built on the backs of people he deemed insignificant. It was about the casual, thoughtless cruelty of a man who had no idea the damage he inflicted. No idea that the waitress watching him was his own flesh and blood. She untied her apron and dropped it on a nearby service station. She walked directly to table 7. Mr. Henderson saw her coming. "Miss Templeton, what are you doing?" he hissed. Bella ignored him. She stood before Carter Ellison, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. He looked up at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yes," Bella said, her voice shaking but clear and strong. "There is." Carter raised an eyebrow. The corner of his mouth twitched. He was almost amused. "I beg your pardon? You sit here day after day, in your expensive suit, passing judgment on people who work harder in an hour than you likely have in your entire life." She began, her voice gaining strength. "You tear people down for sport. You just cost a kid his job because you have a pathological need to feel powerful. Does it make you feel big, mister?" Ellison does. Humiliating people who are just trying to get by fill some kind of black hole in your soul. A hush had fallen over the dining room. Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Liam stared wide-eyed from across the room. Carter's amusement vanished, replaced by a dangerous calm. "I think you are forgetting your place, young lady." "No." Bella shot back, taking a step closer. "I think you've forgotten yours. You're just a man. A sad, lonely man who has to buy his sense of self-worth by belittling others. My mother. My mother taught me that a person's value isn't measured by their bank account. It's measured by their kindness, their compassion. By that measure, you are the poorest man I have ever met." The mention of her mother hung in the air, charged with a meaning only she understood. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not recognition, but confusion. The reference was too specific, too personal. It didn't fit the script of an insolent waitress. He stood up his full height, towering over her. But for the first time, Bella didn't feel small. She felt righteous. "You are fired," he said, his voice a low growl directed at Henderson, but with his eyes locked on Bella. "You can't fire me," Bella said, with a bitter laugh. "I quit." She turned, not looking at Henderson's apoplectic face, or Liam's stunned one. She walked straight to the staff room, grabbed her worn coat and her bag, which held her sketchbook and her dreams. She walked out the back door into the alley, past the dumpsters and the discarded kitchen scraps, and didn't look back. She was unemployed. She was terrified. But as the cool autumn air hit her face, she felt a profound sense of release. She had finally spoken. She had stood up to him, not as a waitress, but as a person, as Sophia Templeton's daughter. She had no idea that her final defiant words had planted a seed of doubt in Carter Ellison's mind, a seed that was about to grow into a truth that would shatter his carefully constructed world. Carter Ellison returned to his sterile, silent penthouse that evening, feeling unsettled. The girl's outburst was an anomaly, a disruption to the predictable order of his world. Employees and service staff were meant to be invisible, or at the very least placidly obedient. He had been challenged, insulted, and berated in public by a common waitress. It was infuriating, yet it was more than just anger. Her words echoed in the vast emptiness of his apartment. A sad, lonely man, the poorest man I have ever met, and the strangest part, my mother taught me. Why would she bring her mother into it? It was an odd, intimate detail in an otherwise professional confrontation, and her eyes, there was a fire in them. He hadn't expected a defiant strength that was both infuriating and strangely familiar. He sat in his leather armchair, a glass of untouched scotch on the table beside him, and found he couldn't get her face out of his mind. The incident had left a crack in his composure. The next morning, his formidable executive assistant, Evelyn Hayes, entered his office with his daily schedule. Evelyn was a sharp, efficient woman in her 50s who had been with him for over a decade and was one of the few people who could tolerate his temperament. "Good morning, Mr. Ellison," she said, her tone crisp. "Evelyn," he began, forgoing his usual morning briefing. "I need you to find someone for me." She paused, tablet in hand. "A business acquisition?" "No," he said, turning to look out at the sprawling city below. "A person, a waitress. She worked at a restaurant called the Gilded Spoon." Evelyn's professional mask didn't slip, but he saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "A waitress, sir? May I ask the nature of this inquiry?" "She was insubordinate. I had her fired yesterday. I want to know who she is." He said, the excuse sounding weak even to his own ears. He didn't just want to know who she was. He needed to. The girl was a loose thread, and he could not abide loose threads. "Her name?" Evelyn asked. He hesitated. He had never once bothered to learn it. "I don't know. Young, 20-some, dark hair, hazel eyes, fiery." Evelyn made a note. "I'll contact the restaurant's management. It shouldn't be difficult." A few hours later, Evelyn returned. She stood silently before his desk, her expression carefully neutral. "Well," he prompted, irritated by her silence. "I have the information, sir," she said. "The waitress's name is Aurora Templeton." Carter froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. Templeton. It was a common enough Italian name, but it was her name. Sophia's name. A name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in 25 years. A name he had buried under decades of work wealth and willful forgetting. His heart began to pound in his chest, a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm. "What else?" he asked, his voice strained. Evelyn seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. "She's 25 years old. She has no living immediate family. Her mother, Sophia Templeton, passed away earlier this year from cancer." The world tilted on its axis. Sophia Templeton passed away. The two pieces of information slammed into him. Sophia was gone, and she had a daughter, a 25-year-old daughter named Aurora. He did the math in his head, his brilliant mind suddenly slow and clumsy. 25 years ago. It was the year he had left, the year he told Sophia that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. Sir Evelyn asked a rare note of concern in her voice. "Mr. Ellison, are you all right? You're very pale." He couldn't breathe. The waitress. Aurora, her defiant eyes the mention of her mother. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a confrontation he hadn't even known was happening. "My mother taught me that a person's value isn't measured by their bank account." It was Sophia's voice coming from her daughter's mouth. He was her father. The girl he had tormented, insulted, and had fired from her job was his own daughter. The enormity of it was suffocating. The guilt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on his chest. All these years he had lived in ignorance building his empire while Sophia raised their child alone, struggling. And then at the end of her life, he had inadvertently stumbled back into their world, not as a long-lost father, but as a villain. "Get me her address," he commanded, his voice. "Sir, I'm not sure that's now." "Evelyn," he thundered, his composure shattering completely. Evelyn, shaken, quickly found the information. Meanwhile, Bella was at her apartment surrounded by packing boxes. She had called Liam and told him everything: the box, the diary, the fact that Ellison was her father. He had listened in stunned silence before rushing over, bringing pizza and a fierce protective loyalty that made her cry with relief. "So what now?" he asked, sitting on the floor amidst the clutter. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice small. "I have enough saved for about 2 months' rent. I need to find a job, any job, and I need to get my portfolio finished." She looked at the locket which she now wore under her shirt. I need to figure out who I am now." A sharp, authoritative knock on the door made them both jump. "Are you expecting someone?" Liam asked. Bella shook her head. She wasn't. She peered through the peephole, and her blood ran cold. Carter Ellison stood in the dingy hallway of her apartment building, looking utterly out of place in his perfect suit. He looked older, more fragile than he did in the restaurant. He looked lost. "Bella, who is it?" Liam called. "It's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's here." She stumbled back from the door as he knocked again, louder this time. Aurora Templeton, please. I need to speak with you." His voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, pleading urgency. Liam stood up, ready to play the bouncer. "Do you want me to get rid of him?" Bella hesitated. Her mind was screaming at her to say yes, to tell him to leave and never come back. But her heart was a confused, treacherous thing. This was her father. This was the moment of truth crashing into her life with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Let him in." She opened the door. Carter Ellison stood there, his blue eyes filled with a storm of emotions she couldn't decipher. Guilt, regret, desperation. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. He wasn't looking at a waitress. He was looking for a ghost. He was looking for Sophia. "You have her eyes." He breathed the words heavy with 25 years of regret. The dam inside Bella broke. The anger, the grief, the confusion, it all came pouring out. "My eyes," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I have her strength too, the strength to survive without you, the strength she had when you left her because she was a distraction." He flinched as if she had struck him. "I didn't know," he said, his voice ragged. "Sophia, she never told me. I swear to you, I never knew you existed." "Would it have mattered?" Bella shot back the hurt of a lifetime in her question. "Or would I have been another distraction from your great ambition?" "Yes," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "God, yes, it would have mattered. It would have changed everything." He took a hesitant step into her apartment, his gaze falling on the open box on the floor. The diary, the photos. His eyes landed on the locket hanging around her neck. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From a hidden compartment, he produced a small object. It was a tarnished silver circle, identical to hers, his half of the set. He had kept it all these years. The sight of it, more than any words he could say, undid her. It was tangible proof of the connection of the love story that had created her. "She told me you were gone," Bella whispered, the anger draining away, leaving only a vast, aching sadness. "She never said a bad word about you. She just erased you to protect me. I think she was protecting you from me." Carter said, his gaze filled with self-loathing. "And she was right to the man I became. The man who sat in that restaurant." He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked around at her small, humble apartment, at the evidence of a life lived without him, without his help, without his love. "What I did to you, what I said, Aurora, there are no words to express how sorry I am." The apology hung in the air, heavy and insufficient, but utterly sincere. Bella didn't know what to say. There was no manual for this, no guide for when your tormentor is revealed to be your father, standing in your living room broken and begging for a forgiveness he didn't deserve but so desperately needed. "I think you should go," she said, finally, her voice flat with exhaustion. He looked crushed, but he nodded. "I understand." He paused at the door. "Aurora, your mother, Sophia. She was the best part of my life, and I threw it away. I've regretted it every single day since." He turned and left the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hall until there was only silence. Bella sank onto the floor, the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally falling. Liam put a comforting arm around her. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning, but the beginning of what she had no idea. It was just the wreckage of two lives finally laid bare. The silence left in Carter's wake was heavy and profound. He did not call or reappear. His first contact was a simple hand-delivered envelope a week later. Inside, a letter written in his sharp, familiar script offered no excuses, only stark accountability. "Aurora," it read, "the word sorry is meaningless for the pain I caused. I cannot undo the past. I only hope that one day you might allow me the chance to begin to try and earn your forgiveness. In my research, I found a review of a gallery showing from 26 years ago. Your mother's name is mentioned. She was a painter too, a brilliant one." Tucked behind the letter was a faded newspaper clipping, praising the vibrant work of an exciting newcomer, Sophia Templeton. Bella stared at it, tears blurring the words. Her mother had packed away her own artistic dreams. This small piece of her past was a gift only Carter could have given. Not an apology, but an offering. It was the first stone in a fragile bridge. A few weeks later, another package arrived containing a professional graphics tablet. The note was brief. "Talent should not be constrained by tools. This is not a gift. It is an investment in an artist I believe in." He was seeing her not just the ghost of her mother. He was investing in her future. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, Bella agreed to meet him on neutral ground, a bench in the city's botanical garden. He arrived not in a suit, but in simple casual clothes, looking older and weathered by a regret that seemed to have settled deep in his bones. They didn't rehash the pain of the past. Instead, he asked about her art and her dreams. He shared stories of the passionate young woman he had loved, and she shared memories of the steadfast mother who had raised her. In that quiet garden, they began piecing together a complete picture of Sophia, the woman they had both loved and lost. For the first time, they weren't a millionaire and a waitress, but two people connected by a shared, profound grief. In the months that followed, Bella threw herself into her portfolio and earned a junior designer position at a small agency, a victory that was entirely her own. Carter began to make amends in his own way, quietly starting a charitable foundation in Sophia's name to support young female artists. Their relationship remained a work in progress, built not on grand declarations, but on small, quiet moments. A shared coffee, a walk through a museum, a respectful phone call. It wasn't the relationship Bella ever could have imagined, but it was real. They were two strangers bound by blood and tragedy, taking the first tentative steps on a long road toward each other, creating a fragile but hopeful new beginning. And so a story that began with cruelty and humiliation in a noisy restaurant finds its fragile peace in the quiet of a city garden. Bella and Carter's journey is a powerful reminder that our lives are not defined by the secrets we keep, but by what we do once those secrets are brought into the light. It proves that redemption isn't a single act, but a long, difficult road of trying to be better day by day. Their story is far from over, but for the first time, it's a story they are starting to write together. If this story of heartbreak discovery and the incredible power of forgiveness touched your heart, please let us know by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story about the unbreakable bonds of family. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. What would you have done in Bella's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.